Hello everybody, welcome to a new video. Today I thought we'd go through UV unwrapping. I've created a model here of a Nintendo Zapper, and I thought the shapes here would be a good idea to maybe do a wrapping tutorial on this, a UV unwrapping. As it throws in some interesting shapes, some round shapes, some square blocky shapes. So I thought we'd go through and just do an unwrap and show you my process. Before we get into it, I just want to show you the add-ons that I'm using here, or the single add-on here, and it's called UV Toolkit. I did have another before, which I think actually stopped working with Blender 5.0, and I found this UV toolkit instead, which I actually found to be a lot better. There's pretty much only, there's a lot of functions here you can use, but there's only one or two which I use a lot. One of them is, if we just go into edit mode here, this straighten UVs, which does exactly what it says on the tin, just straightens up your UVs. And the other function is these quick texture maps. Maybe one day I should sit down and maybe go through all of this and try and find out what you really can do with this add-on. I'm sure there's a lot more here, but this is just a case of needs must, and I needed to quickly find an add-on which actually worked, and this is what I came up to. So that's you'll see in this video, that's the add-on that I'm using. The one thing you would also see quite a lot is up here, UV sync is a great function, because if you have an issue with a island here, say this one, we can press L to select it. If you don't know where it is here, you can see the UV sync will select it. So if we select this one here, you can press grab, you can find where it is. As a very good function, because sometimes it's the geometry which is causing us havoc. The only thing being that if you have this UV sync enabled, then you cannot use this add-on, so you will need to disable, and you'll see me do that throughout the video. So I thought we'd do this little intro just so you have a little bit of information going into the video, and I'll hop into the video and we can get going. So here we are inside Blender again, and here is our model. We'll start off fairly easy and take the lens here. First things first, I almost always go into UV editing here, and then first things first, select sharp edges, preferably with edge select, not vertice select. So mark seams on the hard edges here, unwrap angle based, and then you see here we get quite a simple unwrap. The only thing I want is this circle here to be flat, so we will need to add a crease just here, and then we unwrap again, and there you see we get quite a simple unwrap here. Nothing complex. We add the texture, so if we can just have a look, you can see it's, although on a slight angle which is completely irrelevant, you can see it's a fairly simple unwrap here, nothing advanced whatsoever, simple one to start with. So now we go and choose something else. What can we see here? Maybe the cable. Again, should be quite simple. It will come out in a cone shape, so we'll need to add a cut, but first things first, we'll take select sharp edges, and that's automatically set to 30 degrees, which is normally okay. If you reduce it, then you can see sometimes it picks up some of the edge of a wire here, so if you reduce it, you'll get just the sharp edges, or increase it even, so you just get the 45-degree angles. Then we add creases here, and then as we said, we will need a crease in the wire just so it unwraps properly. It should be quite simple. You understand hopefully that if you have a cylinder, you will need to add a cut through the cylinder for it to be flat out. If you think of like a toilet roll, to flatten that out, you will need to add a cut through the center. And you can see on the left side in the UV editing window, the results are, you can see here, they're coming out, even if we have add cuts through them, they're coming out as rings. So we select them all, click straighten UVs, and this add-on will do the work for us where we'll flatten them all out. First need to disable up here as we said before, then straighten UVs, and what we will do is just turn so they're all pointing the same way, and this will help us when we add some kind of texture. If you think if we're going to add some kind of brushing effect, maybe if the shells here are all pointing different directions, this brushing texture will just be crisscross, so you need everything pointing the same way. You need to think about what you're going to use, how you're going to texture, what are you going to have. I mean, here is a plastic cable, so maybe it wouldn't make so much difference, but it's a good rule of thumb. So here you can see again a perfect unwrap again, nothing strange here. You see no distortion. We're looking for distortion around the edges. And then we can take the trigger here. Again, another very, very easy shape. And we could choose select sharp edges, but it's easy enough just to select these. It's such a simple shape. We don't really need them on these curved parts here. Mark seam, click unwrap, angle base, and then you can see again a perfect unwrap here. Now here we see the first issue. We have a subdivision surface modifier here, and you can see getting close to the seams there's some warping. You can see here when we disable and add. And it took me a long time to work out what this was, but if you go into the subdivision advanced and go down to UV smoothing, if you select keep corners here, it actually fixes it for us. I haven't really researched so deep into why this is the case. I guess it's just an algorithm for unwrapping, but it works. So there's another one in the bank. So you can see on the left here what it looks like before we've unwrapped. Looks quite horrendous. So we can select a screw here. So here right now we have 6 or 7 screws, and every single screw obviously is exactly identical. I personally cannot see the point in unwrapping this screw 7 times. So what we're going to do is delete all the other screws and unwrap it once. That obviously saves us time. And not just that, if you unwrap the screw 7 times, you would have 7 screws taking up texture space on our UV map. And these screws are quite small and hidden away, and I don't think you need to have a separate texture for every single one of these screws. So here I like to cheat, where, well, you're not cheating, you're being maybe a little bit smart. So what you can do is, if you unwrap one screw, so you have the screw mapped to on the left here, and then later if we duplicate that screw, it will be taking up the exact same UV space. You'll see here on the screen, I'll do a little example. So essentially the screws are all on top of each other. So if you see here, we'll select one screw, and we'll select it on the left here, so you can see they're on top of each other. The downside to this will be that every single one of our screws will look exactly the same. Every scratch will be exactly the same, and this is not a problem if your screws are really small and they're not next to each other. Nobody is going to see it. So this is why I'm okay and comfortable with doing this. If you were to do it with something a lot more visible, then you're going to have repeating textures, and it's not a good idea. So choose wisely where you use this method. And one of the reasons I want to do it also is because we can then increase maybe the texture, the size of this screw. So the screw maybe looks a little bit more defined, as opposed to if we unwrap everything at the same size, the screws will be so small that the texture will look quite blurry and quite terrible. So this is a artistic choice. Feel free to look further into overlapping UVs. I think a lot of people try to avoid it if possible. The same thing here with our handle, our grip. Right now I have a mirror modifier. So if I was to unwrap this right side and then commit the mirror modifier, the left side will be taken up again the exact same texture space. And in this case we do not want that, because you will see very, very obviously that the left and the right side are a complete mirror image of each other. If you have a scratch on the right side, it's going to be exactly the same scratch on the left side. So we do want to make sure that these texture spaces are original spaces. They're next to each other, not on top of each other. However, what I'm doing right now is just reducing our time, where I'm going to do all the work on the right side, the mirrored side, and then we will commit to the modifier later, and then we have all the seams free. Essentially, we don't need to do the work twice. This concept shouldn't be new to you. This is just 3D. Do it once and duplicate. So here I'm just trying to work out what's what. Here is the internal part of the grip, is essentially giving us depth. The most unimportant part essentially of this grip, and we have it throughout the rest of the gun also. I always like to add depth to our models, and if you were going to really do a good UV unwrap on this, you could potentially take all of these parts which are internal, scale them down to reduce the amount of texture space it takes up, because it's going to be hidden. You're not going to see it, so you can save texture space. I don't think I did it in this video. I definitely did before I exported this to Marmoset. But it's a very good, I wouldn't say it's a hack, but when you're making models, UV space is king. The bigger the UV space you have, the more detail you have in your texturing. So you want to save space as much as you can. So anything which is not visible, maybe give less texture space too. So here you get a pretty good unwrap again. We just need to fix keep corners, and then it works out fine here. And this is a little bit more of a complex object because you can see it's curving a lot. So you can see it curves down a little bit here, but I mean we have a very even sized texture, and that's the most important thing. But if you were going to have like straight lines, some kind of brush material on this, the brushing will probably start to skew towards the back. This is not a problem for me. One way you could potentially get around it would be to add more cuts. So for instance, just now you can see now we've committed to the mirror modifier, and we give everything its own UV space. And if you did want to get rid of this kind of skewing, it would be worth trying just to add a few cuts in the side and maybe get a more straight. You can see here we do just a test just to see how it would look, but I ultimately choose not to because it's not affecting my model. This is a plastic grip. So if we add a crease here, just unwrap again, mark seam. I say crease, I mean seam. Select these shells here, then unwrap. And then we have a look. And maybe they're a little bit better, a little bit. But I back out, I Control Z this because I don't want to have these extra creases. I'm really happy with the unwrap there. So now we come in on this monster, and again we have a mirror modifier on it. So we will do all of the work on just the one side first of all. And this is kind of the same as the grip. We have some internal edges which will be hidden. And the complexity with this one, you can see I take my time trying to work out where to have it cut on the edge here, because we have essentially a bevel. And normally it's good to have your cuts on your sharp edges, but as this is a bevel, there's no real sharp edge, but we definitely do need a cut here somewhere. So we do an initial unwrap just to check out how it looks, and you can see there's a really long piece here, and this is the internal thickness. So we take every corner and add a seam just to break it up. And breaking it up will allow us to pack a lot better. And the concept here is quite simple. You know, the more smaller shells you have, the easier it is to pack them tighter together. If you have big objects, then it's harder to pack them into small spaces. So this piece, this little cut here, we don't really need, and we don't really need two or three seams here either. Again, we're just testing to see where the best place for this crease will be. If anybody has any feedback how they do when you have beveled edges where you add your creases, I'd be interested to know. Sometimes the best thing is just to commit to something and then just have a look to see what the result becomes. See, here we definitely need a crease because we want to separate this front piece. And everything is pointing to maybe this middle one here should be our cut. Excuse me if I keep saying crease instead of seam. I'm not really using any creases in this, so just assume that when I say crease I mean seam. We're cutting seams. And we're also going in and just trying to remove any unnecessary seams. And when you do unwraps like this, you do see that sometimes the geometry doesn't lend itself to a good unwrap. So we can see this piece here is a bit of an odd shape. And I think if we add a seam here, it will break things up. Also here, you can just add a seam here to cut this one off. So we have these small L shapes up here which we can part. And you can see every time we unwrap after making a few changes, our footprint here on the left gets a little bit smaller, more effective. And we still need to separate this front piece. If we add a seam here, unwrap, now this front piece is going to be completely separated. So this is by far the hardest piece to unwrap. Just because it's some very odd shapes, and we're trying to minimize the amount of work we're doing here. Finding the right places to add seams. We haven't even got to the point where we've added the texture. Now when we add the texture, then we will see how the texture is looking, if it's skewed. So now you can see on the left, it's not looking too bad. Everything is a little bit more packed together. This piece here we can flatten out, and we need to add a seam here. If you disable the modifiers, then it's easier to see the actual geometry. Here we can see also we have no seam. Do unwrap again, and you can see it gets a little bit better again. So now we add our tile texture, and now we can truly see how the texture is performing on our model. Even though we have some quite nice squares here on the left, there's some, it can still be quite distorted. Here's a good example of an internal, this thing we have selected now, I actually start to move it outside, and you can see here also, these are internal pieces which will never be seen when the model is complete. So the idea here is that I'm taking them away from our UV map, and what I will do later is shrink them down and reduce the amount of space it takes up. But I think we actually do, I actually forget to do this somewhere along the process. But you understand the concept anyway. It's wasted space if it's not visible to the viewer. So here you can see an example. There is some skewing here, although the model is quite flat and wrapped. So I'm just testing different types of geometry, because we do have triangles here, and the triangles are essentially what's causing the problems. I have started to move away a little bit from purely quad based modeling. You start to see that it becomes less important with static hard surface models. But here I find the solution is, if I add take away the triangle, you can see there's a triangle here, it collapses into the edge. If you take that away and create a loop straight across, the geometry starts to correct itself. So here we can just see we'll do a bit of a clean up, collapse these in here, and you can see as we work, the model is starting to correct itself. So here's two triangles. So there you go. So now you can see that place, this underpiece here now is perfect again. We have a little bit in the top right corner, and that's going to be the same again, but we have some, you see there's a little triangle here, and that is probably causing the problem. So if we take our knife and cut straight across, you can see it start to repair itself. Take away the square of a triangle, and there's still some distortion here. we have also some n-gons. So it's not completely gone yet. But this is an interesting case study to see how our geometry, you can see here we have an n-gon still, how our geometry affects the unwrapping. And sometimes it's just making the geometry a little bit more chord based can help you out. I mean, honestly, when I was doing this, I couldn't say I knew this is going to be the answer to the problem. But you do just need to go in and test and play around a little bit. See here, you can see a lot of distortion on this front piece here. So we definitely need to make some kind of repair. But you can also see the geometry is horrendous here. We're basically just collapsing a load of triangles. So if we deactivate the modifier so we can see what we're working with. And you can see right there just that one edge loop going across solved almost the entire problem. So here we'll do another unwrap so everything is, all the islands are the same size. If you see that your tiling is completely different sizes, it's because you've unwrapped one small area and it almost always unwraps to the full size of your UV square. So you need to unwrap everything at the same time to get an even scaling. It is something you can fix at the end. You can go into you will see later if you go into the UV and select average island scales, and you'll get everything in the same scaling. So now we're just bouncing around again, just checking that everything looks okay. Try to take away these odd shapes. So you can see here I added a little loop at the edge here, thinking that we can take away this crazy shape, but I actually found that it made the texture worse. So in the end I actually just cleared the seam again, and if you do the unwrap again you can see it became nice and square. In this case, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So here you can see on this ridge we have some distortion, and again the geometry is pretty terrible. Which is most likely the reason for it. So I try and do a small effort just to clean this up. But ultimately the cleaning the geometry here wasn't really helping, so taking away this seam right in the middle here actually just solved the problem for us again. There was a seam in a place where we didn't essentially need a seam. Which is fine. So this piece is starting to look okay. Can't see anything. So here now we can go in, disable the UV sync and just clean up some faces, make them a little bit more square, which will make things easy to pack later. Strangely enough, you can see we have an extra vertex here, so we can go and investigate what is making that go crazy. And this is where the UV sync is really good. So you can see here that one vertex is coming from this edge loop here, which we don't really need, so we can just collapse it in. In fact, the entire loop we can collapse here. Unnecessary geometry. And now you can see my little vertex is gone. And we do a straighten on that one. It's quite satisfying to see a model with a good tiling texture on it. So here we do, I actually did a pack UV on this piece, so everything is packed into the UV shell on the left. It's not the final pack because we need to pack every object into here, but it's a good way just to see what things are taking up a lot of space. So finally we have the barrel to sort out, and this consists of two pieces, which I think will get in our way if we have them both as a part of one object. So I actually split them into two objects, so we have a back piece and the front piece. It will make life easier for us. And this piece isn't so super complex. Select sharp edges, always a good start to unwrap. So then we'll delete half of it, and we add loops on these internal pieces here, because we already know from the other unwraps that these are going to be way too long. They're going to take up too much room. And also their internal faces, which you will never see, so they should therefore take up as little room as possible. In fact, this is one of my bugbears when I do see models. There's a lot of people who would build this gun with maybe a seam down the middle of it, and the seam will just be like a complete and utter flat edge. There'll be no depth to it whatsoever, and if you're going for realism, it's a really big no-no. When you do this small intrusion when you add depth to a model like you see here, those edges catch the light all the time, and that really does make a huge difference to your model. Always add depth to your models, anything you can see. Specifically this gun, actually, I went out onto Google and did some searches just for references for this gun, obviously, and a few 3D models did actually pop up, and I did see quite a few of them where people have just skipped over the depth of the plastic and, you know, just cutting corners, and I think it makes a huge difference. It's a shame because some of the models were really good, good geometry, but just cutting corners. I mean, I guess it depends what you're going to use the model for. If you're going to build a scene where it's a room, and you're looking upon the room and this gun is on the floor on the carpet, you will never see these kind of, like, you know, the depth of the plastic. But for what I'm building right now, I'm going to do like a turntable, and I always strive for realism, so it's something I will never skip. But I mean, I guess it, like I said, it depends what you're doing. If someone hires you to make this gun and say, you know, you're going to see this from about 5-10 meters away, then yeah, I mean, you go for speed. I get it. But specifically the models I was looking at, I mean, they were fairly close up, and it was just a shame. And you can see even here with just this mediocre tile texture, you can see the depth of the seam at the bottom. You can see there's light which attracts your eyes to the plastic seam. If you're wondering why I didn't have a mirror on this, it's purely because the sight at the front of the barrel at the top is not identical on the left and the right, so I couldn't do a mirror on this piece. So as you can see, our check pattern is fairly straightforward, fairly flat. And I do a pack on this also, just to see how it looks, what's taking up room. And the straightening of the UVs obviously speaks for itself. You can get a better pack if you haven't got curved objects. Which I'm guessing you know. Here we have some kind of like hockey stick shape, which is an internal face here. So with that we go then to the back piece here, and again it's pretty much the same process. So I think this gun, I mean it's not really a gun, it's a Nintendo Zapper, I think it's called a Zapper. It's quite a fun object to unwrap. I think it made a pretty good tutorial because it has so many interesting shapes, both round and square, and a little bit in between. But I think the main takeaways from this should be almost always when you go in, do edge select and take sharp edges just to begin with, and you're halfway there. And this is kind of like also a small packing tutorial, so we'll do a bit of a pack at the end here. I'll just show you a few things to look out for. So we can see the cone of this nose here. It's a little bit distorted. Back here seems to be fine. So what I want to do is find, you can see here, I think we can do, we'll select these, see if we can scale them out a little bit. Here you can see I ran a straighten on just the front part for some reason. I assume there's a reason for it, but I scale it up a little bit and then do one more straighten on the entire mesh. I cannot for the life of me wonder why I did it this way, but the result is the same. We just want it to be a square object. And we do the same on the other side. So what we need to consider now, we've unwrapped about, what was it, 8 different shapes. And now if we select all the shapes together, they're all going to be on top of each other. So what we need to do is make sure all of the shells are relative in size to each other. So when we do texture, we don't have things in completely crazy different sizes. So if you look here now, we select everything is on top of each other, except for the screws which we've left to the side. So if we select all of our shells in the middle here, except for these, and then we're going to go up to UV and then average island scale. So now everything is going to be in relative scale to each other. So then if we pack our islands, so now we have a pretty good pack. And there's a few things you would need to check for here. One of them is check overlap. It has happened more than once where you take your model into Marmoset and you get some really, really crazy results, and it's because for some reason, even if you do your unwrap and you pack your model, for some reason some things like overlap each other, and it will play with you, it will cause havoc in your texture. You can see here for one we have like a crazy little seam, so we just need to adjust that. But it's a good rule of thumb to go in trying to find anything which is overlapped before you export your model, just to check that there's nothing crazy going on. And unfortunately it is just a matter of going in and analysing the issue. Some things are as simple as just unwrapping again for some reason. So we select everything again, back out, select, overlap. See this one, if we select it, unwrap. So these here we can just run the straighten on, I think, should be solving the problem for us. We have a few more. Looks like the similar objects one we had before. And one more here. So now we grab everything again and average our island scale again, so everything's the right size, then pack, and then we'll check one more time for overlapping UVs. And now we see nothing is highlighted, so nothing here is overlapping. Point of note, when I pack, I make sure I deselect. Scaling is fine, but not rotation. I don't want our packing to rotate any of our objects. So here I do a pack just on the screw, and then I sink it down. And that's pretty much gonna finish it up for us today. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I will see you next time.